what is the biggest thing that's keeping you stuck? Why do you feel discontent despite achieving what you thought you needed? Something's missing. You've tried other solutions, but nothing has truly fixed your problem, up until now. Download the 3 reasons you're feeling discontent and how to fix it fast at www.jedbrotherson.com and quickly create a clear roadmap that helps you find peace, clarity, and fulfillment. Welcome to the Pulverizing the Patterns podcast, where Jed Brotherson takes you on a journey to confront the roots of your discontent and emerge significant. Each week, we dive deep into themes like overcoming harmful family dynamics, standing up for yourself with courage, speaking out against injustice, and cultivating healthy, authentic relationships. Be sure you visit our website at www.pulverizingthepatterns.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, get ready for empowering stories, expert insights, and actionable strategies that help you break free from negative patterns and create a life rooted in self-respect, clarity, and connection.
Today on Pulverizing the Patterns, I'm joined by Ray Martin, a man who quite literally walked away from it all. Once a high-powered, award-winning CEO in the UK, Ray seemed to have everything society equates with success. Wealth, accolades, leadership, but internally something was missing. What began as a 6-month sabbatical to recalibrate turned into a 14-year global odyssey of inner transformation, mindfulness, and radical authenticity. Along the way, Ray discovered what real fulfillment looks like. And now as a coach and author of Life Without a Tie, he helps others do the same. This is a conversation about letting go of masks, the titles, the pressure, and finding the courage to live on your own terms. Let's dive into this. Ray, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jed. I'm delighted to be with you and your listeners today.
Oh, thanks. Is there anything I missed introducing you?
Oh, I think that sums it up pretty well. It's a lot in there, isn't there?
There is.
I don't know where you want to start to dive in.
Well, what if we start at the moment that you had it all? What did success look like back then? And what did you do? Or what did you first feel that it might not be enough?
Yeah, that's a really great place to start, because I think that I didn't realize until quite late in life that not everything you're told when you're growing up is true or really actually how things are.
Okay.
You know, I was at school as a young boy, and I was told the way to be happy is, or to have happiness, is to get a really good job, get a wife, get kids, a house. Once you've ticked all those boxes, you'll be happy. That's it. So never question that, because your parents know best, your teachers know best. But I found that as I was on my way to doing that, I was ticking the boxes, and there was a high achiever and trying to do really good work when I was in my late teens and early 20s, and bought my first property at 20 or something. I thought, is this all there is? Because if life is just a series of material, big houses, cars and holidays and stuff like that, I thought, I'm never going to get to the end of my life. It's not enough. There's got to be more to it. There's got to be something deeper, more meaningful than this, surely. So I started asking around, and eventually, after searching for 2 or 3 years, I found someone who seemed to be on a different wavelength, had some kind of understanding of spirituality, which I guess was what I was looking for. I didn't call it that. And I got involved with a group of people that were all thinking in a similar way, and we set up a business and everything was absolutely fine. But the guy who started that movement that said to us, you'll never be wealthy, Ray, if you work as an employee for somebody else. No matter how big your salary is, you will always inflate your living costs to absorb all of it. The only way you can really create wealth is by starting your own organization, having people working. And I knew this advice was kind of true, but I didn't act on it until I was in my early 30s. And I left the organization that I was in, where I found my wife, she's my ex-wife now. We both left together to start our own company so we could start this journey of building wealth and creating it. And it was only when I was sort of 7 or 8 years into that phase of the journey that I was feeling most of the time like, the best way I could describe it was that I felt like I was living someone else's life. And I use that phrase particularly because in Bronnie Ware's book, which is called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, it's a very famous book. Millions of people have read it. She said on their deathbed, the number one regret that everyone has is, I wish I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. Now, I was so good at living the life that others expected of me that I was extremely competent. I was the CEO of a company. I'd won the Daily Telegraph Business Leader of the Year award. I had massive salary. I lived in a great house in London. My lifestyle was fantastic. I was extremely competent to know what to do about it. Until one day, my wife and my business partner, she came back from a meeting and said, I'm leaving you, Ray. I'm leaving the company. I'm leaving our marriage. I'm off. And it was really sudden, unexpected. And of course, this was 20 something years ago, but when it happened, it put a hole in the side of my ship that sunk me for a year. I was in a very poor state, very dark, very low, very broken, depressed, unhappy. But it was the beginning of a massive change for me. And that was when I first realized, that something had to shift at that point.
Right. So clarify that for me one more time. That moment that you knew it had to shift
was when my business partner, who I was also married to, my ex-wife, came back from a meeting and said, I'm leaving you and I'm leaving the company. And I didn't see it coming. So all those years that I'd been working to my schoolboy definition of success had accumulated, the grand total of all those 20 years of effort had accumulated in me having a marriage that was breaking down. At the same time that happened, my father got very ill and he died, literally within the same 2-month period. And so within 3 or 4 months, I'd gone from being an award-winning sort of happy CEO on paper to being out of my home, out of my business. My dad had gone and I was out of my marriage and my life was just completely imploded. And I thought, oh my God, the way I've been defining success these last 20 years isn't right. I've defined material success, but nothing at all beyond that, look, in terms of what is success really when you boil it down? What does it mean to be fulfilled? Because it's not this.
Right.
I knew I had to find answers to those deeper questions.
Yeah. So what patterns, like internal or cultural, did you find yourself having to pulverize? Because we're pulverizing.
Yeah. So what happened
in that journey?
It's really a good question. So I didn't do anything much for a year, but I then went, because I couldn't see a way out of the darkness that I was sitting in. I was so broken. A friend of mine said to me, if you're really stuck and you can't see a way out of this, I'd lost all my motivation to run my business and everything. I didn't want to do anything, didn't want to go out or anything. They said, why don't you just go and find a friend or someone who really, really needs help and support and just give 100% service to them for a while. Get your attention off yourself. An act of service could really liberate some new thinking for you. I thought that's a great idea. And I did actually have a friend in Australia who had just let me know that she had breast cancer and she was going to go through chemotherapy and treatment like that. And she had a young son and a husband who was working full time. So I said, why don't I come out for a month and look after you? And that's what I did. It didn't actually shift anything in the month that I was there. But while I was in Australia, I visited another friend who invited me to go and see a play at the theatre with her and her mum. And during that play, I was reading the article, the program, which had notes about the actors in the interval. And it said, we're going to audition for the next play in this theatre. And it's a British play called Out of Order by Ray Cooney. I knew the play and I knew what it was about. And I just turned to my 2 Australian friends for a laugh and said, I should be in that play. I've got the perfect accent. They should have me in that. I had no serious intention of doing it because I'm not an actor, got no training. And I had 4 or 5 clients in England waiting for me to come home so I could do some work with them. And I needed the money desperately. But they said to me, look, you're here on Sunday. Why don't you just go to the audition for a laugh? Just for fun. Not to try and be in the play, but just as a good experience. I said, yeah, that's not a bad idea. So I went to the audition. I threw myself into it, Jed, because that's all I was taught. If you ever do something like that, it's 100% or nothing. So I threw myself in. You can't believe it, but I was offered the leading role in the play. Like not just a bit part, but the central character. And my sister-in-law is actually a professional actress in England. So I contacted her and I said, do you think I could do this? She said, yeah, I think she saw the script. She said, yeah, I think you could. And the director and the people who were running the play were saying to me, we've got every confidence in you. We know you're the right person. We'll help you with everything you need to be ready. So I cancelled the work with the people that I had it set up with, and I spent 3 months in Australia doing this play, and it literally changed my life.
Oh man, that sounds exciting.
It changed my life. But it wasn't until I was on the plane going home from Australia that the epiphany really landed, because I spent 3 months becoming a character called George Pigden in this play. And George Pigden had a certain voice like this, and he wore certain clothes, and he walked a certain way. And I had to learn how to be that character and play that character. And when I was going home, I noticed on the airplane flying back to England, I had a lot of feeling of dread. Oh no, I'm going back to my own life now. And I went, oh my gosh, Ray the businessman is a character. I've been playing him for 25 years without even thinking about it. You know, it was the first time I'd ever thought of it in those terms. And it was like a light bulb going off, because I don't know if you know the coach Tony Robbins, you know, he's quite well known in America.
Right.
You know, he says in one of his books, you're not just the actor in your life, you're the script writer and the director too. And so I suddenly thought, you know, Ray the businessman, I could change the character or rewrite the scenes or kill the series off completely, just completely kill it off. And Ray can be cast in another role completely different. And I chose the third one in the end.
Yeah. Was it disorienting at first to live without like the structure that you had built up in the previous life, the title or the defined path?
I hadn't, it was just before I went on the journey, which I call Life Without a Tie. This was the precursor to it, because all I was doing was trying to find a way to heal from the brokenness of the life I had in England. So I went to Australia and it ended up in the play. Then I realized I didn't need to fix that life. I could leave it behind. And so I decided to sell my house in London and minimalize, because Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus, who wrote The Minimalists, I read their book. And they talked about this experiment where they got the entire contents of their apartments and put them into boxes in their hallway. And for 1 month, just took out the boxes, only what they needed to use, like a toothbrush and a cup and a sauce. And they found that they used about 3% of the things they owned. And they realized how many people have got shit in their house that they never use, you know, all this stuff. Right. And James Woolman's book called Stuffication is very similar. You know, because we all grow up in my era with values based around materialism. But these days, the younger generations have much more values based around life experiences, what he calls experientialism, which is replaced materialism as a high priority. People want money to use for experiences, not for owning things. And that shift has been happening in society, you know, quite quietly, but it's happening. And so I realized I needed to shed myself of those ties, which is why the book I wrote is called Life Without a Tie, because I was tied to my house. I had been tied to my marriage, which I wasn't any longer. I was tied to my career as a CEO, and I was tied to my community of friends, which I had to let go of. So those are the four major ties of anyone's life. So I had all those four ties cut in one go, and I was free to go into the world in a completely different way. Now, I've got to be honest, I planned my sabbatical to last 6 months. I sold my house and got rid of everything, left myself with a bag of clothes and a laptop. I thought I'll be back in 6 months and I'll get a new apartment and I'll start a new business or something. That was the plan. It accidentally and quite unexpectedly turned into a 14-year backpacking journey. I never saw that coming. And that's why I wrote the book eventually.
Did you have, man, quite a journey here.
Yeah, it is.
Was there some things I haven't really heard you express is how really uncomfortable this would be or loneliness.
Yeah.
What are those, how do those play into it?
God, you're really hitting the nails on the head here. You're so perceptive, because you're right. For the first 3 or 4 months, my physical body was in Thailand in this paradise setting, and I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt and flip-flops, and everything on the surface looked great. But inside, I was so agitated and so not at peace. I felt a lot of guilt and shame that I'd wrecked my marriage. I felt really unsuccessful as a person in life, even though I'd had these badges of success. And I felt lost, and I was full of fear about the future, how I was going to navigate this period, like knowing I was in a transition, but hopelessly lost in it. And I started to read books to help me. I read a book called Transitions by William Bridges, in which he described this period when you have an ending, and then later down the road you have a new beginning. So there's something in between those 2 points which he calls in his book the neutral zone. And that's the zone when you're in transition, like when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon and comes out a butterfly at the end. It's inside the cocoon for weeks and you don't see anything happening on the outside. It looks really dull and boring. But on the inside, everything's metamorphosizing and changing massively. And it comes out something completely different. And I was in that process and I didn't recognize it at first. But once I started to read and understand it, I did. And so I realized I needed to write some guiding principles to psychologically protect myself, some guardrails for myself. So I penned these 10 guiding principles that Ray, as a traveler, was going to live by in order to stay safe and stay sane and make it through this transition. And those 10 guiding principles I put in the book as well, so people can see what they are. And I wrote them like self-acceptance, non-attachment, frugality, connection, contribution. I wrote each of these 10 principles to describe to myself what I needed to do in order to stay safe and sane.
Yeah. And so as you have these 10 principles, now there were 6 rules of happiness that you...
Yeah, that came much later.
Out of your journey too. So inside this journey, I guess that's how this started coming to be, is inside the chaos, you felt like you had to have some stability.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. And then that, so let's see, how do we go from inside of that journey into like how you're coaching leaders now, helping them reimagine their life and leadership? And
yeah, I can do that.
What's the most common patterns you see people struggling with
these days? Yeah, I mean, just the stress and anxiety of having to cope with everything that life throws at you. It's relentless for most people.
Yeah.
You know, we live in a world that's speeding up enormously all of the time. The way in which social media demands our attention is relentless. We never had that 20 years ago, so we didn't have to cope with that. You know, we live in a different environment. The environment has changed.
Yeah.
For some people, that brings a lot of stress. For others, they've grown up in it since they were babies. It's maybe not so stressful.
Yeah.
But certainly that brings it. And we also live in, you know, there's certain pressures politically and economically that didn't exist before. So the world's changed a lot. So right. I see stresses, anxieties, burnout, pressure, those kinds of things all the time. But I also see lots of challenges for people who lead teams or lead businesses or lead organizations or anything like that. You know, it's very difficult to become what I would call an inspirational leader amidst all of that. Huh. So that's the main challenge that I work to help people resolve. How do you become an inspirational leader amidst all of those conditions?
Right. Inside of these conditions, I'm trying to think of this next question or how to say it the right way.
Yeah.
How can we help the listeners begin cultivating the mindfulness and the presence so that they don't need to have so that they don't need to like leave their life behind and still what can help them get that entry point?
Yeah, I would say my answer to that question, I'm sure other people would say something similar, but mine would be, you know, it's like if you're going to go on a 3-month tour of Africa or something, you know, you'd take certain things with you so you wouldn't get lost, like a map, compass, food, you know, everything like that you need. Well, you need certain things to be able to navigate your life well. You need, for example, a vision. You need a picture of where you're trying to get to. So that would be one place I would definitely start. Where am I? What does my great life look like if I were to draw a picture of it? You know, I wanted to be in that life a year or 2 years from now. What would that look like? What would it feel like? What would it sound like? Who would I be around? What kind of things would my daily life involve? What is that vision or picture that I have? I mean, some people do this, or they do it half-heartedly, but most of the people that I know don't do this on a regular basis and certainly don't review it. So having a picture, a vision, I call that, a map, if you like. Second is, you know, what are my values? When I wake up every day, how do I want to show up in the world? You know, what what's important to me? You know, what do I want to embrace and embody in my values, for example? I'll be person. Mine are, I value freedom. So I don't want to feel like I've got no autonomy or anything like that. I value love. I want to show up in most conversations with some compassion and kindness rather than judging and that sort of thing. I value integrity. I really like keeping promises that I've made and doing the things I've said I'll do and doing the right thing. And I value exploration, which is I'm only really sort of thinking life's amazing if I'm on the frontier of something new all the time, stepping into the unknown with something or other, whether it's a language or a musical instrument or something I'm reading or some thinking I'm doing. I love being on the edge of my comfort zone. So those are my values. And every day that I wake up, if I honor each of those values, at least in one small way every day, I'm really happy.
Yeah.
But if I go through a week and I've not honored any of those values, and in fact almost had the opposite, where I feel like I'm not living my values, I start to feel quite crabby and contracted and insular and annoyed and frustrated.
Like you've slipped out of alignment.
Yeah. So vision, values, having an idea of what your purpose is in life. I mean, my purpose for me is clear. I mean, I'm at a later stage of life. I've done a lot of things. I've always considered myself to be a torchbearer for greater human consciousness. So my purpose is simply to spread more joy and happiness wherever I go. That's my purpose.
Yeah.
Whether it's on this podcast or as a coach or as a family member, it doesn't matter. My purpose is to spread the light of joy and happiness and help people evolve. You know, that's what I want to do. That's my purpose of being here. What else is important? Being in your element, I think, is really important, Jed.
Oh.
Like the way that Sir Ken Robinson, the late and great Sir Ken Robinson said, you've got things that you're really good at, your strengths, your talents, your God-given talents and strengths. And then you've got things in your community or the world that you really care about. And if you can combine these two, you are in your element. So I'll give you an example. I was really good at business and persuading people to buy stuff. And I really cared about an elephant sanctuary in Thailand and an orphanage in Nepal when I was traveling. I really cared about those things a lot. So I created a fundraising foundation and used the things I was really, really good at to raise money for the things I really care about. And I ran the New York Marathon in 2009 and raised $15,000 for those places. And then I ran 4 more marathons and raised another $40,000 for those places.
Great job. That's amazing.
So that was me in my element. I didn't get paid a penny for any of that. But I think I loved that more than anything I've done in my life. And I could have done it 24 hours a day without losing any energy.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you're in your element, it's like boundless. You never get tired of it. It's like it's a very creative place to be. And so the question I ask people is, how could you be more in your element? You know, what is that for you? When are you in your element? Some people, they have to get into their element outside of work. There's some people that have got jobs where they're never in their element. So they have to go and sing in a choir or go dancing or whatever it might be for them. It's not always a work thing, but it's great if it is a work thing. It's brilliant. I've got an older brother who retired last year, but he'd been an airline pilot all his life because when we were kids, he loved airplanes. He said, I don't want to, I just want to be a pilot. And he was a pilot his whole life. So every day his life was in his element.
That's kind of the dream, right?
Yeah. And that's definitely something to think about, you know, how you can do it.
Right. So if somebody's feeling stuck right now in this rat race that we're all having, like these are the things that they need to get clear on. It's the vision, values, purpose, and be in the element.
Yeah. And also beliefs is quite important because we carry around in our thinking limiting beliefs, which don't serve us at all, and empowering beliefs, which really serve us. So an example of an empowering belief that I have would be, you know, it's really good to be as generous as you can. That's an empowering belief because whenever you're generous, it always comes back to you some way or other. A limiting belief would be, I really want to go and do a project I've been offered, but I'm not good enough. I'm not skillful enough. I'm going to say no because it's too difficult for me. That's a limiting belief.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Marissa Peer. I don't know if you know her, but
Marissa Peer, yeah, she's a hypnotherapist. Yeah, she's brilliant.
Yeah, like the two biggest things I think that are coming to my mind from what she said is the biggest things affecting us are the pictures in our mind that as we're thinking these thoughts that we think, and the beliefs or the words that we're using behind those pictures.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, people don't realize, I think, just how powerful their thinking is on how their reality is shaped.
Yeah.
It's hard to get your head around, but thinking is at the center of everything. If I don't want anyone to think, because I went on a long traveling journey to change my life, but you do not need to go anywhere to change your life. You need to change your thinking. That's the core of it.
Right. Okay. So I guess that would be the message that I would send to the listeners is that's the core is get.
Yeah, but you got to know how to do it. You got to. That's why my 6 rules for happiness, rule number 3 is become your own observer, because you have to separate yourself from your thinking in order to see it, and then start to change the kind of thinking that you're entertaining.
Yeah, man, that sounds perfect.
Yeah, so that's one of the rules, is to become your own observer. You've got to be still enough and mindful enough to notice that you're having a thought rather than be consumed by the thought. So, for example, if I was in the traffic in a car driving and you come out from a side turn and cut across me, I could just go, bloody hell, why you idiot? You know, that's me consumed by the thought. But if I've got a second of mindfulness, a pause of mindfulness, I can stop and I can still feel that rage, but I can say, oh, I notice I feel really enraged by that guy, by what he's done. I notice the rage coming up in me. I notice my physiology has changed now. So now I'm not so much consumed by it. I'm still feeling it, but I'm now able to say, do I want to respond from inside that, or do I want to respond from outside that? Now I've got a choice about how I respond.
Right. I know that this is still part of my journey. Like, being in that, how do I want to respond to this every day? Myself.
That's what having a mindfulness practice is so valuable. I did a Vipassana retreat when I first started this journey in 2006, and I've done several, and I've got a mindfulness practice I've had for 15 years. And so it's really helped me to generate mindful energy so that I've got that ability to pause. But it doesn't always work. I've got to tell you, Jed, I'm not perfect. I don't want anyone to think I'm a saint. You know,
none of us are.
I still kind of lose it sometimes.
I just kind of think of it like a dance, you know, like we're going to trip sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So but it's served me really well to evolve that practice.
Oh man, Ray, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd really want to share with the listeners? Because I am out of questions, man. You're just a wealth of knowledge. Yeah, no, I mean, I kept meeting people when I was traveling, because 14 years is a lot. You meet tons of people. But in the first 3 or 4 years, when people would say, how long have you been traveling? And I'd say, 3 or 4 years. Oh, 3 or 4 years. How do you manage that? Yeah. And I'd tell them the story. And I had some savings in the beginning, which sort of ran out after 5 years or so. And I had lovely conversations with people. And at the end of some of those, they might sometimes say, can I give you my email address? And I'd say, why is that? They say, well, your stories are brilliant. In case you ever wrote a book about this journey, I'd love to read it. Would you write? Tell me. And I laughed and I just said, you're kidding me. I'm doing this to heal myself. I'm not doing this to be an author. I had no desire to be an author. But by the end of the first 5 years, I'd say I had about 100 email addresses. And it dawned on me one day, oh my gosh, the universe wants me to write a book. I'm being told all the time, write a book. So then I put myself on a writer's course and started writing the book, and it got published a couple of years ago. Oh, congratulations. And I never wrote a book before, but it's been really well received and people have loved it. So I'm really happy that I did it. Well, where can people find Life Without a Tie and learn more? Oh, it's Amazon. If you're in the US, is where most of the people are buying it. It could be in some other shops, but I don't know exactly which ones, but it's definitely on Amazon. And I've also got a website called lifewithoutatie.com. And that's for people who specifically want a signed copy, because I have to post it from my home. Which I'm happy to do for some people, but it costs a bit more. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We kind of already answered this question, but just to kind of wrap it up, is there one idea or practice that you hope stays with the listeners long after this conversation ends today?
Yeah, the one idea is don't be one of those people that Bronnie Ware talks about. I wish I'd lived my life true to myself and not the life that others expect of me. It doesn't take a huge shift to start living life true to yourself, but it is a conscious shift that is required. And I would say that even if you can take one small step in that direction, your life's going to improve, so it's worth considering. It's not really, to me, it's like a no-brainer, but, I definitely would encourage people to consider that.
Right. As you said, worth considering. I'm like, man, that's such a vital part of my being that I think it's worth more than consideration. I think we really need to seriously get in that. Ray, I thank you so much for sharing your most valuable commodity, your time with us today.
That's okay, Jed.
Man, you're amazing. Thank you for being here with us today.
Cheers, Jed.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning into the Pulverizing the Patterns podcast, where Jed Brotherson takes you on a journey to confront the roots of your discontent and emerge significant. Remember to visit our website at www.pulverizingthepatterns.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Pulverizing the Patterns podcast.